On Christmas morning, 1969, a department store in Tokyo placed 100 gold wristwatches in its display case. They cost as much as a small car. Each one carried a tagline on the box that was either the most confident claim in the history of manufacturing or the most reckless. Someday, all watches will be made this way. The watch was the Seiko Quartz Astron. The man who built it was an engineer named Tsuneya Nakamura, and what happened in the decade that followed would destroy an industry that had existed for 3 centuries, not gradually, not quietly, but with the kind of speed that leaves whole communities of craftsmen standing at their benches wondering what just happened. To understand what the Astron did, you have to understand what came before it. For 300 years, Switzerland had owned time. The Jura Mountains, the valleys around Neuchâtel and Geneva, the workshops in La Chaux-de-Fonds, where a teenager with steady hands could build a career, raise a family, and retire knowing his son would have work after him. By 1970, the Swiss watch industry employed 90,000 people and controlled more than 50% of the global market. It had survived 2 world wars and a Great Depression without loosening its grip on the one thing the whole planet agreed Switzerland did better than anyone else. Switzerland made the finest watches on earth. That was not an opinion. It was a fact built into every trade agreement, every export ledger, every jeweler's display case from Tokyo to Toronto. The best Swiss chronometer of 1969 kept time to within 5 seconds per day. The men who built them had spent their careers chasing hundredths of a second. They were proud of those 5 seconds. They had every reason to be. Tsuneya Nakamura had joined Seiko in 1944 in a Japan that was still at war. He was a precision engineer in a country that had everything to prove. Over the next 15 years, he built a reputation inside Seiko's manufacturing division in the Japanese Alps, as the kind of man who understood not just how a movement worked, but why it failed. In 1959, he was handed a project called the 59A, a formal internal mission to investigate what a quartz-regulated wristwatch would actually require. He started with a team of 7. The physics were already understood. Pierre and Jacques Curie had discovered in 1880 that passing electricity through certain crystals makes them vibrate at a precise, repeatable frequency. A quartz crystal, cut at the right angle, would oscillate 8,192 times per second, a number that divides mathematically cleanly down to 1 pulse per second, 1 tick, 1 movement of a hand. The problem was not the crystal. The problem was miniaturizing the electronics around it to fit a human wrist, powering it with a battery that would last, and doing all of it at a manufacturable cost. For a decade, Nakamura's team did the work. They built prototypes in rooms that smelled of machine oil and solder flux. They shipped a portable quartz chronometer to the 1964 Tokyo Olympics and timed the games to a precision the mechanical world could not touch. By 1967, they had a wristwatch prototype good enough to enter the Neuchâtel Observatory competition in Switzerland, the same competition the Swiss used to rank the world's finest chronometers. The Seiko entry didn't win, but the judges knew exactly what they were looking at. Back in Neuchâtel, another team had already seen it. The Centre Electronique Horloger, a consortium of roughly 20 Swiss manufacturers, had been working on a quartz wristwatch since 1962. By 1967, they had a working prototype. Their movement, the Beta 21, broke every accuracy record in the room at Neuchâtel. The Swiss had the technology. They had built it themselves. And then the men who controlled one of the most prosperous industries in European history made a decision that would cost 60,000 of their countrymen their jobs. They chose not to commercialize it. Mechanical watches were what their factories were built for. Mechanical watches had higher margins and more prestige, and the customers who bought them kept buying them. The Beta 21 remained a prototype, a curiosity, a road not taken. In Tokyo, there was no such hesitation. In late 1968, Seiko's president Shoji Hattori walked into Nakamura's office and gave him an ultimatum: a quartz wristwatch ready for commercial sale before January the 1st, 1970. 1 year. And to make the pressure total, Hattori reassigned every engineer already working on quartz to other departments and told Nakamura to build new teams from scratch. The ladder was being taken away. The only direction was up. Nakamura made one decision in those 12 months that would define the entire industry for the next 50 years. He chose to drive the second hand using a stepper motor, one precise electronic pulse per second, one mechanical step, one clean tick. It was a choice made under pressure, on a deadline, with a diminished team. It was also the correct choice. Every quartz watch built after it, across billions of units, in every country on Earth, would follow the same architecture. He had not just built a watch, he had established the template. On Christmas Day, 1969, 100 Seiko Quartz Astron watches went into that Tokyo display case. Within a week, all 100 had sold at $1,250 American each. The Astron was accurate to 5 seconds per month. The finest Swiss chronometer was accurate to 5 seconds per day. The Astron was not marginally better, it was 12 times more accurate. And Seiko had printed on the box for the world to read that someday all watches would be made this way. The Swiss read the announcement and found reasons to disagree. It was a novelty. It required a battery. The cases were not finished to Swiss standards. Customers who valued true watchmaking would always return to the mechanical movement, its balance wheel, its hairspring, 300 years of accumulated knowledge wound into a space the size of a coat button. This belief was sincere. It was also the most expensive mistake in the history of European manufacturing. By 1973, Seiko had reduced quartz prices enough to reach the middle market. By 1977, Casio had pushed digital quartz watches below $50, not below $100, below $50. A watch that kept better time than any mechanical movement ever built, for the price of a dinner out. The accuracy gap that Swiss craftsmen had spent entire careers chasing had become a consumer product, discounted to a price that made the whole question of mechanical precision feel almost absurd. Between 1970 and 1983, the number of Swiss watch companies fell from 1,600 to 600. Employment collapsed from 90,000 workers to 28,000. Market share fell from 50% of global exports to below 15%. Brands that had existed for a century simply stopped. Workshops in the Jura that had employed 3 generations of the same family closed without ceremony. The ability to read a movement by sound, to regulate a hairspring by touch, skills that took years to acquire, had nowhere left to go. An entire civilization of craft, 3 centuries in the making, was running out of time faster than the watches it had built. Walk into a Swiss workshop in 1978. The benches are still there. The loops, the tweezers, the tiny drawers of gears organized by tooth count, all of it still present. But the orders have thinned. Not all of them gone, not suddenly, just enough every quarter to make it clear that the floor beneath the whole structure has been quietly moving. A craftsman who trained for 7 years is now competing with a crystal the size of a grain of rice. Here is what makes this story genuinely painful. The Swiss had the answer in their hands before Seiko shipped a single Astron. The Center Electronique Horloger had a working quartz prototype in 1967. The men who built it showed it to the industry's most powerful decision-makers. Those men looked at what they were holding and chose to protect what they already had, not out of stupidity, not out of laziness, out of the perfectly rational instinct that an industry employing hundreds of thousands, built on craft and the most recognizable reputation in the world, did not need to tear itself apart and start over. They were right that mechanical watches were beautiful. They were right that customers valued the tradition. They were wrong about whether it would be enough. It was not enough. The recovery, when it came, was built on the very thing the industry had refused to sell. In 1983, a Lebanese-Swiss consultant named Nicholas Hayek merged two failing Swiss watch groups into a single entity and launched a watch designed to beat Japan at its own game: cheap, quartz-powered, automated, sealed, and aggressively fun. They called it Swatch. By 1992, 100 million had sold. The profits funded the survival of Omega, Breguet, and Blancpain. The industry that had refused to commercialize quartz was saved by a quartz watch. What Hayek saw, and what the Swiss had taken a decade too long to understand, was that the question had changed. Before the Astron, the best watch was the most accurate one. After the Astron, accuracy was simply the floor, something any $10 movement could clear. So the market split. You bought quartz because it worked. You bought mechanical because it meant something. Mechanical watches became more valuable precisely because quartz had made them obsolete as tools. The luxury mechanical market today is worth over $25 billion annually. Most of it was built on the wreckage that one Christmas morning in Tokyo left behind. Stand in Le Chaux de Fonds on a winter morning. The museum there holds a Beta 21 prototype behind glass. The movement Switzerland built first and chose not to sell. Close your eyes. Here a workshop floor in 1967, 50 watchmakers at their benches, the faint rhythm of escapements, the smell of oil on cold metal. Open your eyes. The prototype is still behind the glass. The decision was made 50 years ago and it cannot be unmade. We did not lose the Swiss watch industry to better engineers. We lost it to the men who sat across a table from the future and chose the past. The watches they built were beautiful. The decision they made was not. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel and like the video. There's a lot more coming.